And welcome to the introduction to today's podcast. I'm Clay Jenkinson. I'm actually sitting in the sanctum sanctorum of Russ Eagle's house in Salisbury, North Carolina. Very few people are ever admitted into this place, and it's an honor to be part of this. And the subject of today's podcast was the coming Doris Kearns Goodwin 8-part Kevin Costner series on the American West. And I don't know yet because I haven't seen it, but I was interviewed for it twice, and I'm told that I'm a major talking head in the series. We'll see. Topics of this series, John Colter is one of them, the first mountain man. He was on the Lewis and Clark expedition. John Brown in Bleeding Kansas is another. The famous Johnson County Range Wars is part of it. The Fetterman Massacre that occurred on the Bozeman Trail in 1866 and so on, all fascinating. And so we talked about that for the first two segments. And then we had a special guest, Meredith, a granddaughter, who's 12. And she is a very passionate defender of her grandmother, Elizabeth Eagle. And she saw a video post that I did on Facebook when we were eating gumbo in New Orleans. And I accused Liz of being a little haughty on the question of gumbo, which she admits to, by the way. Meredith saw it, and she was a little miffed that I could be critical of her grandmother in that way. And so she challenged me to have her on the program and to be able to defend Liz. And she did a wonderful job today. She's a really extraordinary, a truly remarkable young woman. She's 12 years old. She's a dancer. She's a singer. She writes. She's one of those children that you just hope that the trajectory continues to be as remarkable as it has been to this point. And she has a lot of raw talent and confidence, and she wanted to talk about this. She's also a big lover of musicals, including Six, about the wives of Henry VIII, and we did talk about the musical Hamilton, which she loves, and I do too, but she thinks that Hamilton is right and Jefferson. I think she regarded him as sort of a playboy hanging out in Paris while the real work of the American system was being done back in the United States. So we had a little short debate, and Liz Eagle got involved too to defend herself on the gumbo front. She does make, and she and her sister Sandra make a tremendous gumbo. Gumbo has never been a part of my life until now, and now we have this sort of weird gumbo quarrel going on of no importance except to have fun. Anyway, it was great to have Meredith on the program. She'll probably come back. She challenged us. She wrote out a whole series of questions. She was articulate and funny and good-humored, and we've made up. And so maybe now she will forgive me for the attack I made on her grandmother, but it was an attack out of respect and love. So just a couple of things. So the Friends group is now up. You should join at the level that you're willing to do. But there's a book club that comes at a little bit of a higher level. And that book club, 4 books on the American West to tie in with my Lewis and Clark trip. That's an important part of joining the Friends group. And we'll be starting those Zoom meetings and so on shortly, before June 1st, almost certainly. Secondly, the Steinbeck retreat is September 21st through 29th in Salinas and Monterey in California. I'll be joined by my friend Russ Eagle, who's a Steinbeck scholar, and it'll be this lovely week at the National Steinbeck Center at Salinas, where we will hold our sessions. We'll also go on field trips every day to important locations in Steinbeck's world. This is a great cultural tour. Please go to the website ltamerica.org and check it out and do come. We'd love to have you as guests on that. It's really something. I've loved doing it before, but this year, of course, I do it after spending a whole year in the presence of John Steinbeck via his late 1961 book, Travels of Charlie. So the Friends group, please join. The newsletter is free. Sign up and you'll receive a new, fresh newsletter every single week. The Lewis and Clark trip is full for this year. The winter retreats at Loxaw Lodge are full for this year, but you can get in line for future events of this sort. And next year in the fall, we'll be going to France, Jefferson's France, which is also a fabulous tour. So be thinking about all of that. So this week's program is working with Doris Kearns Goodwin, working on documentary films, hosted by my friend Russ Eagle from his sanctum sanctorum here in his home in Salisbury, North Carolina, and the special guest appearance, a cameo appearance by Liz, and a guest appearance by Meredith, the 12-year-old high-spirited granddaughter. So let us go to the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. This is Russ Eagle. I'm your guest host this week. I'm here to speak with Clay about his involvement in the new History Channel series that is titled Kevin Costner's The West. So welcome, Clay, and welcome especially to North Carolina, where you've just arrived to reclaim your airstream. And to do that, it took a literal 5-day sprint across America.
It's great to be here, Russ. I'm actually, for those who are listening, in the famous Russ Eagle Man Cave. It's legendary. I've wanted to see it for years. This is the second time now I've seen it. And I can describe it briefly by saying there are books in every direction, of course. There are a whole series of framed prints of grandchildren and of travels. There are LPs. There are 33 LPs. There are John Steinbeck posters in every direction. There's a painting by El Greco on the wall. There's a lot of St. Louis Cardinals gear, although at one point you had more.
Right. But, when used books became readily available on the internet, my space kept filling up with books. So things kept getting pushed out. So
it's a great space. I envy you this, and it's kind of a sanctum sanctorum along the lines of Thomas Jefferson. But you're right. So we started in Bakersfield, California. And we were in a brand new pickup, and we sprinted across the southern tier of this country. We went through Texas in a single day, and now we're here in my RV, the Airstream, which you stored for the winter for me. We extricated it with some difficulty, but there's a water leak, and so there's a little bit of delay.
That's true, and you actually started not in Bakersfield, but in Bismarck. So you've already put quite a few miles in before you even get started this year. And that made for, a lot of motel living over the last week. And one thing I noticed, when you're killing time in a motel with the television is that your face is starting to show up in these trailers for this new series.
That's correct. So I was so fortunate to be asked by Doris Kearns Goodwin, the eminent American historian, to be part of her new 8-part History Channel series, Kevin Costner's West. I went to New York to be interviewed twice. There are 8 subjects. We can review them, and we're going to do some programs on them individually as time goes on. But I just urge everyone who's interested, beginning on the Memorial Day weekend, to get your local listings on the History Channel, and that series will be 8. And I think it's over 8 weeks.
And before we start looking at those individually and get your thoughts maybe on some of them, let's just talk about the world of the talking head in general. How do you get a gig like that?
How do you get a gig? Well, I've been lucky because in 1997 or 96, I was asked by Ken Burns to be in his documentary on Thomas Jefferson. And it was successful enough. I was also an advisor, a historical advisor on that series, on that documentary, that I've been in 6 subsequent Ken Burns documentaries. The 7th will be coming out, I think, next year. It's on Henry David Thoreau, my favorite American author. And so I've learned a lot by working with the great Ken Burns. He's, of course, America's greatest documentarian. And so I've been in those films, and on the strength of that, the History Channel has called me a few times. I've been in 4 or 5 History Channel programs, but none. The last one that was of any size was Doris Kearns Goodwin's Theodore Roosevelt a couple of years ago. And I love that, and I have stories to tell about that. But this one was started, I think, 2.5 years ago, and I've had the joy of preparing to speak about these 8 separate topics in the history of the American West.
And these things don't happen quickly. I mean, we hear about a Ken Burns series years before it's going to happen. How long ago did you start working on something like this?
So at least 2 years ago. So you get the call, and of course I say yes. And then you train, because there are 8 topics. And just let me quickly say what a few of them are. The Johnson County Wars of the late 19th century in Wyoming. John Brown, when Kansas was being competed for by slave interests and non-slave interests. John Colter, who was on the Lewis and Clark expedition and became, I suppose you'd say, America's first mountain man. I know a lot of history, but I really had to train. So this isn't something you just do off the top of your head. And if you want to succeed, if you want to be used in a film like this, you need to be spot on. In other words, you need to be historically accurate because there are fact checkers. It's very easy to make mistakes. You mispronounce a name, you get a location wrong of some historical incident, you exaggerate or under-exaggerate the number of people that were involved. All that is going to wind up on the cutting room floor. So you have to be spot on historically. I read many books, at least one or two books on each of the subjects, and then I watched documentary films, and then I watched Hollywood films, which can be a trap. And so by the time I actually flew to New York, I had a 6-inch thick pile of notes, and on the plane I'm saying, let's see, when was the Fetterman massacre? When were the Whitmans killed in Oregon, and so on. And eventually, after a night in a motel in New York City, you walk into the studio and they put a little powder on your nose, do a little dressing of your hair on set with some hairspray, and then they clack the famous clacker. And the person who's asking the question says, so why did the Blackfeet attack John Colter in Montana in 1809? And now you're off and running. But I read everything that I could, and there are several really fine books about this and biographies and documentary films. I don't want to just come and do the Wikipedia reading on these things. I want to think, how does this fit? What do I think I know from my education? What can I learn to know? Is there a new way of looking at this that's more inclusive, more nuanced, richer, more complicated? And then when you do all that, I make endless notes and outlines and so on. And I rehearse sort of in front of the mirror in the shower as I'm driving and say, well, if I were asked about John Brown's character, what would I say? Because you're getting ready. When you go in there, of course, you're nervous and you're sure you're going to screw up. And so you have to be ready for whatever comes. And I learned a lot about John Brown by doing this. And I learned a lot about Henry David Thoreau by doing this. And something bigger, which is how do things match up in American memory? So that how does America memorialize things over time? And why is John Brown regarded as a hero when he could equally be regarded as a villain? I'm sure he is in some southern quarters.
So you go in knowing somewhat what you want to say, but you don't know exactly what's going to be asked. So when you leave, do you say, hey, I nailed that? Or do you leave with no clue of how it went? Are you confident you're going to appear? What goes on in your mind after you walk out of there?
Well, so the interview takes place for about 2.5 or 3 hours, and you have one little break in the middle, and you get on a roll and say, I want to go back and re-answer that question because I didn't do a very good job. So it takes a few minutes to work out the kinks and to sort of get into the rhythm. But if you're on, and on any given day, it's like being a baseball player or a basketball player or a tennis player or a golfer. You may have it and you may not. It's maybe a day when you're, truly articulate, and there may be a day when you're a bumbling fool. But you do your best, and then when you leave, you have no idea what's going to happen. You assume you're going to wind up on the cutting room floor. You just have to assume that. And all the way back to the hotel, through that night in the hotel, and on the plane the next day, I'm just beating myself up and thinking, what an idiot. I should have said this. That was a stupid answer. Then, I'm not even going to be in the film now. And you don't know, Russ. So you wait. And of course, they've let me know. I'll come back to that in a minute. But you don't know. I haven't seen a cut of this. I haven't seen any of it. And so I don't know until it's on the screen whether I'm in it at all. And if I am in it, I don't know if I'm any good. Sometimes you just say something like, John Brown hated slavery. And okay, well, was that worth flying 2,000 miles for? Because they cut it up in the ways that they need to. And so it's bewildering. And I'll tell you this, in every documentary that I've been in, I've probably been in a dozen now and made a few myself. The first thing I do when I leave is to write and say, give me another chance. Bring me back. I'll do anything. I'll pay my own way. I know what I wore. Just bring me back. I promise I'm better. And in this case, this 8-part series is so big. It's 8 hours on these historical subjects of the American West that they did call me back. And I went back to New York for a second interview, which almost never, Ken Burns never does that. I went back for a second interview of another 3 hours. And I was able then to, correct some things that wanted to be more precise about, and then to go on about other questions. And I see my role, just to get serious for a moment, as a humanities scholar more than a historian. In other words, what I want to provide is to question how we think about these things. So just let me give you one quick example before we go to break. John Colter. So the famous incident occurred in 1809 when he was trapping in Blackfeet country with a fellow Lewis and Clark veteran named John Potts. They were attacked by Piegan, by Blackfeet warriors, and John Potts resisted and was shot up with arrows and killed. Colter knew he shouldn't resist, so he surrendered. They stripped him naked, completely naked, gave him a 400-yard start, and then they chased him to kill him. This was just going to be kind of a game, give him a chance, because they had some respect for him. This is historically known as John Colter's run for life. So I have two questions about this. One, he's the only witness. So he comes back after this is all over. He ran 5 miles and his bare feet were bloody and like hamburger. So the question is this even true? I'm sure there was something happened out there, but did he make himself a bigger hero in talking about this than he actually was? We don't know. And the second question that I ask is, well, what about the perspective of the Blackfeet? He's trespassing in their land without license. They don't like this because they have existing trade relationships with white people in Canada. They have some bad memories of Lewis and Clark anyway, because there was a famous gunfight between Meriwether Lewis and several Blackfeet in 1806. So that's just 3 years previous to that. And it's their country. And I learned as I prepared for this, Russ, working on another project involving the photographer Edward Curtis, that the beaver is a sacred animal to the Blackfeet. And so the Blackfeet were justly offended by all of this, and they gave him a chance. He survived. But I wanted to bring that perspective to it. And not all History Channel producers are willing to hear that kind of broader questioning of patriotic American purposes. But I tell them when I go in, if you don't want that perspective, and I don't have a strong opinion about this, but I think that perspective has to be on the table and needs to be in the film. Of course, once I leave the studio, I have no idea if they're going to use it or not.
All right, Clay, we need to take a break, but when we come back, maybe we will take a look at some of those specific episodes in this upcoming series. We'll be right back. This is Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. Welcome back to Listening to America. I'm Russ Eagle, and I'm talking with Clay about his involvement in the new History Channel series, The West. And Clay, as I look over this episode list, I think there will be plenty of viewers who are not familiar with quite a number of these. Which one would you consider the most obscure?
Well, I think probably Joaquin Murrieta, who is regarded as, I'm using air quotes here, as the Robin Hood of California. This is 1853, so this is right after the discovery of gold, and California is being invaded by the mining community. That gold rush is the epitome of what a gold rush does, by way of bringing thousands and thousands of people suddenly into a place and overwhelming it, and there are no services, there are no amenities, there's no law, truly. And it's chaos for a time. And so this is a period when the indigenous people and the Mexican people, the Spanish American people of California, were being overcome by this wave of gold-seeking people. I know a little bit about this because I lived through the Bakken oil boom in North Dakota, and it's the same thing. I mean, the state of North Dakota between 2003 and 2013 was overwhelmed by this phenomenon, and there was crime, and there were gangs, there were drug problems. There were bidding wars for construction companies and road building companies and those who built the pads. I mean, this was a wild, wild thing that happens, and that is a 21st century oil rush. The gold rush is an unprecedented moment. And so what happened was that this man, Joaquin Murrieta's family was just wantonly killed. And so he went wild, of course, and sought revenge, and he would rob the rich and kill some of them and steal and give money to the poor and so on. So he became known as sort of the Robin Hood of California. And there was a bounty for him. He was killed, he was beheaded, and his head was put into a jar with alcohol. And that jar was taken around all the camps, the mining camps and the other communities of California. And for a fee, people could see the head of this terrorist, Joaquin Murrieta. I didn't know much about that. I'd heard a little bit about it at one point, but it was the learning curve on something like that was straight up. And so you ask, well, why did Doris Kearns Goodwin, using Kevin Costner as her host, he wouldn't have done any of the research. He's just coming in to be Kevin Costner. But why would they choose this? So I think they wanted to get in all the ethnicities, men and women, Native Americans and Anglo-Americans, but they wanted to have a Spanish American or a Mexican perspective too. And this is a story about the almost unbelievable disruption that occurs when white people or any people invade a place and begin to sort of spread themselves as violently as necessary and often ruthlessly to get what they want. And there's going to be pushback. And so many people just suffer. But he, because of the way his own family was killed, took up arms and became a kind of a folk hero. Mexican Americans, Mexicans, Native Americans, and people who were distrustful of this gold rush became his advocates, and they were kind of cheering him on because he was part of what we would call the resistance. So I didn't really know that story very well, but so when I came to it, I thought, well, what can I add to it? Because there are plenty of people who can just talk about that story. I'm not one of them. I'm coming in at it from the outside, but I knew I could talk about how resistance works and why resistance exists, but also about the fallibility of American memory. I mean, to call him a Robin Hood is probably to put a label on him that belittles his larger experience. And so I would want people to know that we do this, that we create a Daniel Boone figure, or we create an Oliver North figure. We do this periodically in American history, and we aggrandize something into mythic status, somebody who may or may not actually deserve that status, and then we slap labels on it. And my view as a humanities scholar is that we need, as you say with Steinbeck, to complicate things. There are more perspectives. There are other ways to look at this. We shouldn't just look at this the way we were taught in school or the way it's been served up in textbooks, or even worse, in Hollywood films.
You speak about bringing in multiple ethnicities. One story that we were actually talking about the other day as we were driving through Texas is the story of Cynthia Ann Parker, which I think is a really fascinating story.
It is. She's the mother of the famous Quanah Parker, who is regarded as one of the great Native leaders in American history. And we went through a village called Quanah on our mad rush through Texas. But he comes up in all the histories, Bury My Heart in Wounded Knee, and so on. All the histories feature him because he was of mixed blood. He became a very important and dignified leader, and he was sort of one of those important figures as the transition occurred from complete armed resistance to figuring out how to accommodate the white domination and still retain some tribal identity and dignity and some cultural sovereignty. That's really, really difficult. That he was a wonderful figure of sort of a liaison between the two cultures, and that at some point the Crazy Horse figure dies or the Geronimo figure is finally arrested. That the person of pure resistance plays an important role, but in the end, that person is either killed, as Crazy Horse was in 1877, or Geronimo, who was finally captured for the last time in 1886. That figure has to move, and then you come to Red Cloud, the Ogallala, who understood, having defeated the United States in the Powder River War in 1866, said, I'm not going to fight anymore. From now on, I'm going to fight diplomatically. I'm going to do my best for my people as a diplomatic leader rather than as a war leader. And so this is a very important part of this. And so to get to the story, Cynthia Ann Parker is just a child. She's living on the western frontier at the time of Texas. It's way east of what the frontier would eventually become. There's a raid by Comanche. She's taken. She is just a child. She then is acculturated into the Comanche world, and she marries a prominent Comanche man. He's one of the leaders of the band. Meanwhile, the white community, of course, is appalled because not only has she been abducted, But as you know, Russ, whenever a woman is abducted into the native world, all of the sort of sexual nightmare scenarios start to float around in the white world. It happened all the time with blacks and whites in the American South, and it certainly happened with respect to abduction stories, and there are lots of them, stories of white women who are abducted, and they usually are raped, I suppose you'd say, and they're often beaten and made to perform drudgery. They're captives, they're slaves. And so when this happens, the white families in the white world goes out of its way to go rescue her from what they called, and I'm using air quotes, a fate worse than death. So she lives for a long time with the Comanche and has children with her husband, including the famous Quanah Parker. And the white people try again several times to rescue her. Eventually they do. But here's the rub. When they finally rescue her, she doesn't want to be rescued. She's quite happy. It's in a sense the only world she's known after the trauma when she was 6 or so. She doesn't want to come back, but they won't listen to her because she has to come back. That's the trope. That's the formula. She has to be assimilated back into the white world, but she doesn't wish to. And they bring her back and she's incredibly unhappy. And eventually she tries several times to escape. So imagine this, that they're forcing her to return to the white world. But in that white world, she will never be regarded as whole again because she has had sexual relations with a native person. And so she's in that formulation, she's tainted now. So she can't live in either world. She was quite happy in the Comanche world. They weren't going to let that happen. She's back in the Anglo world against her will. And yet, they look down on her now as this fallen, tainted, damaged woman. So this raises all sorts of really important questions in American life. And I didn't know a lot about that story. I knew about Quanah Parker, and I guess I had, read something about her life, but I hadn't looked at it closely. And once you look at it closely, I'm ready to get on that plane and get to New York and start to say, well, come on, wait a minute. We need to, again, to recomplicate these stories. Think of how difficult this is. Obviously, they want her back. Of course, they want to rescue her. They regard these as savages, and they know that they have almost certainly raped her. They want her back. That makes perfect sense to me. The natives, of course, are going to resist that because she's now a prominent member of their world. No one seems to have asked her what was best for her. So at that time, women did not have the same agency, as we would put it, or sovereignty that they would, gain in the 20th and 21st centuries. This raises so many questions. And if you go to, say, Amazon.com or your local bookstore, you can find whole books of captivity narratives. There are scores of them. It became an important genre in American life. And so she is she's an actual human being who had an actual really traumatic set of experiences. And then they locked her into the convention of the white captive woman. And so this is the kind of thing I love to think about and read about. So it's a horrible story, but it also is one that needs to be illuminated. And the old history was, John Colter was perfectly righteous, and how dare the Blackfeet to attack him. Kit Carson was perfectly righteous, and how dare Native people or Mexicans to resist him. Or Murrieta was, a colorful figure in California, but he was a terrorist. That's the old history, when it was a white triumphalist perspective. It's too late for that, in my view. And so I'll tell you this quick story. I was in another History Channel series, and when they contacted me, this is not Doris Kearns Goodwin. When they contacted me, I said, "Sure, I'd love to do this, but tell me the subjects." And they did, and I said, "Okay." When I was going out to Seattle, if I come, I'm going to tell the truth as I see it, and I'm going to tell these more complicated approaches. And they said, "Oh, we don't want that. This is feel-good history." And I said, "Well, then it's not history." And they said, "Well, why don't you come out? I'm sure it'll be fine." And so I flew out at their expense, of course, and stayed in a motel and went to this thing. And then just before I went on, the producer comes on again. He says, "I'm really asking you to tell a story that Americans will feel good about." And I said, "I just can't do it." He said, "Well, let's see what happens." So then I was interviewed for 4 hours, went away. The series came out, and there were all these guys who were the other talking heads who were wearing like buffalo robes and had long stringy hair, and they were like mountain men types, and they were telling us how great John Colter was and how great Kit Carson was, and this was America at its best. And I was reduced to just a few really bland and non-controversial sentences. So then they called me the next year and said, we're doing another series. We want you to come back. And I said, you're wasting your money and you're wasting my time because I can't conform to what you want. So when Doris Kearns Goodwin called me, I said this, and they said, of course. And she's much, much more sophisticated. So I don't know what's in it yet, Russ, but when I see it, I'll be interested to see how sanitized it is. And, even Doris Kearns Goodwin can't control the producers of a major entity like the History Channel, and they love a more upbeat, patriotic, pro-white American point of view in which we sort of just pay a little lip service to other perspectives, but we don't really take them seriously. I don't think that will happen because this is, after all, Doris Kearns Goodwin, and it's also Kevin Costner, and I can't imagine that he would want to be part of that either. We know that he has a deep sympathy with the people who were victimized by Manifest Destiny, so I'm guessing it'll be fine, but I literally won't know until I turn the television on.
Well, I think one source of optimism along those lines is that these are not really feel-good stories that are being told here. Things like the Fetterman Massacre, for example, and Lewis and Clark is not part of this series. I think it was back around 2013 when I first met you. You were doing a lot of work on an HBO series that never got made. Is there going to be, do you have any hopes that somebody's going to do Lewis and Clark in a series like this?
Yes, I do. So I've gotten to know Doris Kearns Goodwin's producing staff and her assistant, Beth Lasky, very well. And so we've had a good deal of communication, correspondence, and conversations. And in each email I say, if Doris Kearns Goodwin would only do a 8-part series on Lewis and Clark, it would probably be the most popular of all the series that she could do. This is a golden story, and it hasn't been done. So, the Far Horizons was a film from 1955. It's an appalling failure of basic information. There was a National Geographic IMAX film that was made during the bicentennial, quite good, but it's short. Ken Burns, of course, did a masterful job in his 1998 Lewis and Clark, but that's decades ago, and a lot has happened since then. We have a lot more information, more perspectives. Native people are more at the table, and so on. So I keep every letter I say, really, you should do this. You should do this, and they kept kind of saying, yeah, okay. So then about this great thing happened to me, Russ, about 3 weeks ago, just before I left for Bakersfield. I get a call, and Beth Lasky's name comes up on my phone, and I thought, I'm trying to get out the door. But I thought, I guess I better answer it. And I answered it and said, hey, hello, Clay, this is Doris Kearns Goodwin. And I just about fainted. This is the first time I'd had a direct conversation with her. I'd been on a couple of Zoom calls with other people. And she said, how are you doing? And she invited me to come to something I can't go to, unfortunately, in Los Angeles, the launch party with Kevin Costner and others. And it kills me that I can't.
Yeah, we'd love to see you on the red carpet.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be wearing my tux, etc. But I can't go. So, but anyway, we're talking, and she's like saying, "You're a big figure. You can't believe how big you are in this film, and you're not on the cutting room floor, and you'll be in every episode, and we're so pleased with you, and we want to do more with you." And so I'm thinking, okay, if you're going to talk like that, Doris Kearns Goodwin, I'm going to talk back. And I said, "Come on, just listen. If we do Lewis and Clark, I'll donate my time. I know the whole Lewis and Clark network of scholars and Native people and spokespeople and buffs and reenactors and so on. I'll work tirelessly on this. If you do this, this will be one of the great things that you ever do." And she said, well, tell me more. She has a book contract and so on. So I don't suppose, Russ, it'll actually happen. But she said, send me a memo. So while I've been here at your house in North Carolina, waiting for my RV to be fixed. It has a little water leak, and it's at the repair shop. I've been outlining the 8-part series, and I'm connecting it to talking heads, the great David Nicandri and Gary Moulton, the editor of the Lewis and Clark Journals, and all these people that would be important. Amy Mossett of the Mandan, and Jack Gladstone of the Blackfeet, and other Native spokespeople. Who have a track record of really being able to ring the bell when they're asked questions about all this. And so I'm going to send it to her at their request. And then I'm going to say, come on. And I will say this, if she says, no, I just can't do it, we're just too busy, I'm going to shop it around, because I think that this is a golden project waiting for someone to grab it. And we haven't had a really serious examination of the Lewis and Clark expedition since 1998, Ken Burns. And although that's outstanding, it's 2 hours. It's a little on the romantic side about landscape and so on. I think that this would be a fabulous and historically important project. And I really want to get this done because there's waning interest in the Lewis and Clark story. But that's not because of the Lewis and Clark story. That's just because we haven't been paying attention.
All right, Clay, it's time for another break. We do want to look for that around Memorial Day, right? On the History
Starts then. Go
Channel.
to your, go to History Channel schedule, but the first one is on Memorial Day weekend, and then you'll see as they unfold. And of course, you can use your recording devices, and it'll later be available on other platforms. But yes, it's Kevin Costner's West.
Okay, on the drive back from Bakersfield to North Carolina last week, we actually had a couple more opportunities to sample some gumbo. And
Gumbo,
so
yes.
I think when we come back, we might have a special guest and we might revisit that controversy.
Apparently, I've touched off some rancor, family loyalty, some real aggression, and I'm prepared to take whatever hit I have to take. I'll just say this. I do love gumbo now, but I'm not certain that I buy the Eagle family, the extended Eagle family mythology about gumbo. Can we leave it at that for the moment?
Yeah, they were waiting for you with torches and pitchforks. This is Listening to America, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Listening to America. We've been talking about Clay's involvement in the new Doris Kearns Goodwin series. But as I said before we went to break, Clay, you made an attack on social media back in November after the great gumbo battle in New Orleans.
Well, let me just say that I'm a nice person, and I love Liz, my dear friend, your wife, Liz Eagle. She's an important part of Listening to America and the Dakota Sky Education Cultural Tours, and she's really, truly one of the nicest people who ever lived. And she almost has no hard edges, but when it comes to gumbo, she's kind of a creep. And, when I would send pictures from Richmond or from Radford in Virginia or from, Austin, Texas, and say, look, I had gumbo tonight, within seconds, within microseconds, I'd get a snotty response. That's not gumbo. You don't know gumbo. She didn't taste it. She didn't see it. She's denouncing it. And I'm thinking, I'm feeling a little hurt. And then I finally, you two said, Russ and Liz said, why don't you come on to New Orleans and we'll arrange with a really extraordinary chef at a beautiful restaurant called Mimi's. We'll show you what gumbo can be on earth. I dutifully came at enormous personal expense. We went out like 37 minutes or 37 miles from downtown. We had to Uber all day to get to this place. And then this guy, Ray, your pal Ray, served a magnificent meal. He lied a lot about the meal, but the gumbo was really, really good. And so I said to Liz, let's do a little video. And that was the mistake I made, because on the little video I said, Liz, it's well known that you're arrogant and haughty about gumbo. And whoa, you're up.
Well, that was where this impression thing started.
And who are you, by the way?
I am Meredith, the young responder, apparently.
And you are, well, how are you related to Liz? Let's get that in.
She is my grandmother.
Exactly. So you're prejudiced, but go ahead.
Okay, so.
And you were appalled when you saw
You're
this.
appalled, really. Kind of angry at me.
Yes.
Thanks, though.
I first became aware of your work when I saw you on Facebook attacking her.
Attacking her.
And I believe you called her haughty, arrogant, and proud.
All true.
After she took you to New Orleans and introduced you to real gumbo. So when I heard that you were coming through town, I sort of felt the need to come and defend her. She is anything but haughty and arrogant.
That's your defense?
Yes.
Have you had gumbo?
No.
So you know nothing about gumbo?
I have absolutely no clue what gumbo
But
is.
you're just, if I had said she's haughty about tennis, you would have gone after me.
Yes.
It's just loyalty, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, and so you are how old?
I am 12 years old.
And you are in what grade?
6th grade.
And you are a dancer and you
Yes.
sing. You have many talents. Apparently,
Thank you.
history is not one of them because you don't seem to
No.
know about the history of gumbo. But so you're defending Liz, and was she pleased to have your defense?
I think so.
Let's ask, because Liz, you've come into the picture here. Please tell us. First of all, I don't think you were really upset when I called you arrogant and haughty. I think you kind of loved it because the video that you made went viral, and people said, "More Liz, more Liz, more Liz." Less Clay, more Liz.
I think for me, it came very natural that I would pick on you, and I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
But I would see that, and I see the picture, and I said, that just doesn't look like the gumbo I'm used to and that I know is true. And it just seemed easy to come right back at you and say, no, Clay, I need to help you with something. And so we did that. And then when Meredith was upset, I thought, well, that was really cool that she took up for me. And I guess now you're her nemesis.
I've heard that you do a parody of me, that you perform as me, that you've cut videos.
I wouldn't say perform.
Can you do a little of your anti-Clay parody here?
She's been nothing but haughty, arrogant, and proud.
But don't you also do hello, it's Clay Jenkinson? Don't you do that?
Oh yes, the it's Clay Jenkinson. Like, is that what you say at the beginning of
Hello,
every
everyone.
video?
Hello everyone. It's Clay Jenkinson.
It's like everybody just knows your name.
But you just think that there's something wrong with my style? Is that your point?
Maybe you could put a new spin on what you could do. It's the same thing.
Yeah, but if I had been nice to your grandmother, we wouldn't be in this situation, would we?
Most likely.
Okay, and you claim you've never actually eaten gumbo.
I have no idea what gumbo is.
I'm witness to Liz's reactions when Clay sends these, I'm in Dayton, Ohio, having gumbo, and
she goes nuts.
She does. That's not gumbo.
Just because I'm not here.
Tell him to send a picture, but that's not gumbo.
That's what bothers me. It's like, without a lot of evidence, just goes right into it like, I know gumbo, you don't know crap.
It's the same reaction she has when she hears you encouraging people to come on the Lewis and Clark trip, and you say, oh, you don't even have to paddle. You'll just float down the river. And I can say that since the trip is sold out for this year.
Yes, we sell out every year. Now, Meredith, what is your favorite soup?
Chicken noodle soup.
Okay, that's pretty bland. We're going to get you some gumbo. Now, let's talk about your life here. So you are a student.
Yes.
You have 2 brothers.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your life as a performance artist.
Well, I've been dancing since I was 3 years old at the same studio.
Okay.
And I got my first pair of point shoes when I was 9 years old.
Gee. You've been in many productions.
Yes.
Name some.
Every year since I was 6 years old, well, not every year except for the pandemic year because they didn't have the younger children doing this performance, I've been in the winter performance of the Nutcracker.
Now, I'm told that you dance above your age class, that you
Yes.
are younger than most of the people you dance with, and they admire your discipline and your work.
Yes, I'm the youngest person out of 10 or 11 people.
And you love this performance.
Yes, I love.
And you love to sing too, and I've heard you sing. You also, I hate to bring this up, but you've also seen the blockbuster musical Hamilton.
Oh, I love that musical so much.
I'm told you can sing the whole thing. You can sing it all. That's amazing. And do you have an attitude towards Hamilton and Jefferson?
Yes, my favorite character is probably Hamilton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I feel like whenever we are introduced to the character of Jefferson, he seems like an arrogant person who thinks he
Haughty?
knows.
Is he haughty?
Yes, quite haughty. Yes, and he just seems like he knows everything and tries to let everybody else know that. Like he's just been partying in France while they've been fighting in the war. That's how he's introduced.
I mean, it's okay that you have that view, but does that come out of the musical?
Yes.
That he's just been kind of Mr. Dance in Paris, and while the rest are actually winning the war. But my daughter kept saying, "Are you nuts? You got to see this." So we went, and then when King George comes and says, "I'll be back," you know that great song.
Yes.
the crowd in London went nuts because, they're British and they're like, yeah, no kidding, America. You're pro-Hamilton, even though, he was a dualist and he wanted a monarchy and so on.
Yes. And I have not had many American history classes, so I don't fully understand the relationship between Hamilton and Jefferson.
Yes.
But I know that you portray Thomas Jefferson.
That is true.
And I thought you might be able to explain some of the big differences in the two men. What is a Hamiltonian and what is a Jeffersonian?
Well, I'll be really brief because I want you to talk. This is your moment. But, Hamilton believed in a big, strong central government. He believed in capitalism and a lot of, banks and money and stocks and so on. He believed we should be an industrial nation rather than an agrarian nation. He wanted us to fight wars. He thought wars were where you win glory. And he wanted a very strong government. And Jefferson wanted a weak government and the people would be free and in charge of their own lives. And he wanted an agrarian society and so on. But I'll tell you this, Hamilton won the great debate because we're a Hamiltonian country.
Yes.
And not a Jeffersonian one. So you're right about that. Are there other musicals that you really love?
I really like the musical Six.
Oh, tell us about that. Isn't that about Henry VIII?
Yes.
Tell us
well, it's not really about Henry VIII. It's about his 6 wives.
He had 6 wives.
Yes.
And what is it? Divorced, beheaded, died before he had survived, right? And tell us who those 6 were. Do you know?
Okay, so his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, she was divorced because she had a girl, and basically he wanted to divorce her because she didn't have a son, but she argued with him, so she didn't get anything.
So he wanted a son. Of course, you need a son.
Yes.
And she couldn't produce one, so he divorced her, and he had already fallen in love with somebody else.
That's the reason why he had 6 wives. He wanted a son to be the king.
And so who came second in this list?
Anne Boleyn, she was beheaded because she had a girl, and in the musical...
Not just a girl, Elizabeth, who became the greatest queen in English history. But yes, she had a girl, not a boy.
Yes, she had a girl, and in the musical, she was supposedly flirting with other guys,
there were other boys, yes.
He beheaded her. And
not himself, but he had her beheaded, right?
Yes. Yeah. And his 3rd wife, Jane Seymour, who actually had a son, but she died in the process of having her son.
Short life.
Yes, and people say that she was the only wife that he truly loved.
So divorced, beheaded, died. We got 3.
Yes.
Now go on.
The 4th wife, Anne of Cleves, she did not have any children, and she did not remarry. Whenever she did marry him, but whenever he met her, he thought that her picture looked better than what she looked like.
He thought she was kind of gross.
Yes.
Yeah, didn't really want her.
And so he was like, okay, I'm going to divorce you. And she didn't argue with him. So she got like a castle and some money and stuff. So
now there's 4.
Yes. And the 5th wife, Catherine Howard, she was very young, stupid, frankly. He accused her of like cheating on him. And
he accused her again of adultery.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And she was beheaded.
And she's from the famous Howard family that are really important to the north of England, and they're always rebelling against everybody. But she was the 5th wife.
Yes. And his 6th wife was Catherine Parr, who outlived Henry. So.
And by this time, he had become gigantic.
Yes.
And he
old.
had gout. And
yes.
he was not a attractive man anymore. So you've seen this.
Yes, I have.
Where?
I've seen six times.
Whoa. You've seen six times?
Yes.
And then are there other musicals that you greatly prize?
I really like Anne Juliet. Okay. It's about like Juliet from Romeo and Juliet, and basically she does not kill herself after Romeo dies.
She lives on.
Yes.
And that's a musical you've seen in New York?
Yes.
No? So you've been very fortunate. You're 12 years old?
Yes.
You've been all over. You've gotten to see some extraordinary theater and musicals, and you are a performer yourself.
I actually got to see Phantom of the Opera before it ended.
Where?
In New York.
In New York. Wow. So that's amazing. And so what is your dream? If you could do anything with your life, would you want to be a ballet dancer, an actress, a writer, a singer?
Well, I don't really have like my eyes on like one certain thing. There's been like phases. I was like, oh, I want to be a writer. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be an actress. So I'm still kind of like figuring out like what I would really want to do.
Okay, well, you're young and you have plenty of time, of course. But I just want to say that I saw you on point. I've seen videos of you dancing. I saw a little of it last night. And it takes an enormous amount of dedication and discipline and hard work to get to the level that you're already at. In other words, you've got the discipline, right? Whatever you decide you want in life, you're going to go get.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And you have to, obviously your parents are great models for that.
Yeah.
And you're right. Last night you were reciting some of your poetry.
Yes.
A storybook that was AI graphics, and you had written the verse.
Yes, it was not written with AI.
No, you wrote it.
Yeah, I wrote it.
Right. I wasn't accusing you of that,
Yes.
Meredith. But your brother did. He admitted that he had an AI help for his poem, but it was still a good poem. So you wrote your own verse.
Yes.
And what else do you write?
Sometimes, like, just for fun, if I have an idea, I'll write just like a random chapter book or something like that.
That's
I usually
cool.
get like 1 or 2 chapters in, and that's about it.
And then lose interest or move on.
Yeah.
You got as I think you wrote to me when I asked you to be on this program, your first line of your letter was, I have a very busy life. And I thought, okay, we'll try to find a time
Yes,
where we can get you, right?
Yes. I have one more question about Hamilton.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do, yes.
In the musical, Hamilton wants the federal government to assume state debt and establish a national bank, but Thomas Jefferson and James Madison don't want to. What is assuming state debt, and what does it mean?
So we racked up all sorts of debt during the Revolution. Couldn't pay for what we needed, horses and carriages and ammunition and so on. And so the states racked up debt and the national government racked up debt. And it was huge, this giant debt. It was going to be very difficult to pay off. And so Virginia and other states paid their debt off right away, but some states didn't pay it off at all. And so when Hamilton came in, he looked at all this and said, it's just a mess. It's a morass. We're going to have to fix this. We'll make it efficient. So he said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to lump the state debt with the national debt into one giant national debt. And then we can address it systematically and pay it off in a rational way. And he was right, by the way. But Jefferson and Madison and others thought, hey, wait a minute, we paid the Virginia debt. If Maryland didn't pay its debt, or Connecticut, it's not our fault. Why should Virginians be taxed twice for all of this? That was one reason. The second reason was that Jefferson and Madison didn't want a strong central government. They wanted basically state governments and a kind of confederation of states rather than a strict and potent national government. So they opposed it. Hamilton won. And every historian who's fair admits that this was one of the great making moments of American civilization, because we have to get your fiscal house in order. And Hamilton knew how to do it. And even though some people hated it and some people were actually damaged by it, the greatest good for the greatest number is how you do things in a civilization. And so this was this fight, but it was way bigger than money. It was really about, what is the American Revolution? Is it about the people in the states, or is it like building a great nation state instead? And Hamilton was for that. And Jefferson thought that was a really, really bad idea. So that's the background to it. And, you're going to see it again, which I hope you will. There are some books that you could read that are specifically written for people that are seeing Hamilton, where you could see, oh, this is what that means, and so on, because that will make it even a richer experience for you.
Yes. And as a Jeffersonian, can you say any nice things about Hamilton?
Yes, of course. I can say that he was a brilliant financier. He was a great writer. The Jeffersonians kept trying to trip him up by at the last second asking for a report from the Treasury Department. And Hamilton would stay up for 3 days to get it done, just like that. He was just like what we would call a policy wonk. He was very brave. He fought in the Revolution, and he fought nobly. He was at Yorktown. He was one of the heroes of Yorktown. He was, maybe the best thing you can say is he's beloved by George Washington. And Washington was not an easy man to give out praise. And he thought the world of Alexander Hamilton and made him his aide-de-camp, and then made Hamilton the first Secretary of the Treasury. So I can say all those nice things. Say a nice thing about Jefferson. What do you got?
Well.
Yeah, I thought so.
I hate to break this up, but we're out of time. Clay, I know you need to pack up your truck and your Airstream and head to Poplar Forest. Again, we want to remind listeners that you will be coming into their living room on the History Channel. We encourage people to log on to ltamerica.org and to follow you as you hit the Lewis and Clark Trail in a
I
few
hope
days.
so. You know, I wish I had a couple of gallons of that gumbo to take with me, you know, but so I could, then if I showed Liz a picture of it from Toledo, Ohio, or St. Louis, Missouri, she'd say, that must be good gumbo because, oh, I made it. But I don't have that option. So before we meet again, Meredith, and I hope we do meet again because I really admire what you are already doing with your life and what you're going to do. I hope you read all the books you possibly can because that's as important as dance. But I think you should try gumbo. And then I think maybe you owe me and my many thousands of listeners an apology. I think we do another program where you say, you know, she was haughty, she was arrogant, and you were right, Mr. Jenkinson, that Liz is a great human being, one of the greatest, but she's a little bit difficult on the gumbo front.
I apologize, Mr. Jenkinson, but I believe that you were wrong.
All right, I'm going to step in here now. We'll be back next week with another edition of Listening to America.
See you next week, everyone.
Bye.